Prime Minister Modi's podcast, a 3 hour long podcast with Lex Fridman, is making both waves and headlines. It covered a gamut of subjects, everything from whether the Prime Minister fears death, what he thinks about criticism, his relationship with the RSS, to relations with both China and America under President Trump. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo story. What do we understand about the political brand that is Narendra Modi after his 3 hour in depth conversation with podcast host Lex Fridman? The podcast, which was dubbed using artificial intelligence, English, and Hindi and multiple other languages, has been, of course, already seen widely both in India and abroad. It covers a range of subjects from the personal to the political, from geopolitics to domestic politics, from Modi's relationship with the RSS to the Gujarat Riots of 2002, to whether he fears death, what he thinks about criticism, and also some very interesting and timely questions on India's relationship with China, a rather interesting response there that has been welcomed by China, to a very personalized account on his relationship with Trump, one that Donald Trump, the American president, has shared. Also, Modi talks about his failed attempts at peace with Pakistan, a country that he describes as being linked to terrorism no matter where it takes place in the world. How do we decode everything that Modi has said, or perhaps what he's left unsaid? The Congress, of course, is targeting the Prime Minister for his comments on criticism. But beyond that, there's a lot to understand about current politics, about how Modi as a political brand positions and repositions himself with, some would say, every few years and as the context changes. Let me introduce our panel today as we decode the Prime Minister Modi podcast with Lex Fridman. Joining us is Dr. Manisha, Priyam, political analyst and well-known academic. Good to see you, ma'am. Also joining us is Sandip, Ghose, political analyst, someone I often introduce as a fan of the Prime Minister, but sometimes with caveats. Do any caveats apply? We'll find out. Sugata Srinivasaraju, who I think I could describe as an equal opportunity offender, has criticism for all sides, like a classical journalist and author that he is. Good to see you, Sugata, after a long time. And also joining us is Neerja Chowdhury, who has spent a lifetime studying different prime ministers. Her recent book on prime ministers did not include the current one. Perhaps there's going to be a separate book on his 3 terms, and some might argue more in office. Good to see all of you. Let's get started with something that in a way defined Modi's politics, Modi's approach to media, Modi's approach to criticism, and Modi's approach to quote unquote liberals. What the Prime Minister said about 2002 and the Gujarat riots, the burning of the Sabarmati Express, and the riots that followed. This is what the Prime Minister said to Lex Fridman.
ये सारी घटनाओं का बैकग्राउंड हो और उसमें एक इतनी बड़ी संख्या में लोगों का मर जाना, जिंदा जला देना, आप कल्पना कर सकते हैं कि स्थिति कैसी होगी। कुछ भी नहीं होना चाहिए, हम भी चाहते हैं, कोई भी चाहेगा, शांति रहनी चाहिए। दूसरा जो कहते हैं ये बहुत बड़े राइट वगैरह, तो ये भ्रम फैलाया गया है। अगर 2002 के पहले का डेटा देखें तो पता चलता है कि गुजरात में कितने दंगे होते थे। हमेशा कहीं ना कहीं कर्फ्यू लगा रहता था। पतंग के अंदर कम्युनल वायलेंस हो जाए, साइकिल टकरा जाने पर कम्युनल वायलेंस हो जाए। 2002 से पहले गुजरात में 250 से ज्यादा बड़े दंगे हुए थे और 1969 में जो दंगे हुए थे वो तो करीब 6 महीना चले थे। अरे तब तो हम कहीं थे ही नहीं दुनिया के उस चित्र में, उस समय की मैं बताऊं। और इतनी बड़ी घटना एक ऐसा स्पार्किंग पॉइंट बन गया कि कुछ लोगों की हिंसा हो गई, लेकिन न्यायालय ने उसको बहुत डिटेल में देखा है, लंबे अरसे। और उस समय हमारे जो विरोध के लोग हैं वो सरकार में थे और वो तो चाहते थे कि हम पर जितने आरोप लगे थे हमको सजा हो जाए, लेकिन उनके लाखों कोशिश के बाद भी जुडिशरी ने पूरी तरह डिटेल में उसका एनालिसिस किया, 2 बार किया और पूरी तरह निर्दोष। जिन लोगों ने गुनाह किया था उनके लिए न्यायालय ने अपना काम किया है। लेकिन सबसे बड़ी बात है जिस गुजरात में साल में कहीं न कहीं दंगे हुआ करते थे, 2002 के बाद आज 2025 है, गुजरात में 20-22 साल में कोई बड़ा दंगा नहीं हुआ।
गुजरात में 2002 से कोई बड़ा दंगा नहीं हुआ. That's how he closes those comments on the Gujarat riots. Neerja, I'll start with you. Some might say that what happened with Prime Minister Modi, who was then Chief Minister Modi at the helm of Gujarat, has defined his approach to media, to liberal politics. He was denied a visa to the United States of America for many years. It defined him in many many ways, and so to hear him talking about it all these years later, what did you pick up when he spoke about that, and he ended by triumphantly saying that there hasn't been a big riot since then in Gujarat, but before 2002 there were at least 250 other significant riots.
I think what I get out of it is, so far you felt that Gujarat riots was something that Narendra Modi didn't want to talk about too much in his interviews. At least for a while, he has not talked about it at all. This time he seems to have taken, so to speak, belt the cat. Remember what was the situation just before the riots took place? Very provocative situation. Remember, there were 250 riots before 2002. Remember that, okay, whatever you may say, the courts have acquitted me, courts have held the guilty, punished the guilty. And remember, there has been no communal violence after 2002. So that is the way he's interpreted Gujarat. It's like, final closure to the Gujarat riots. That's the attempt his words were making.
Hmm. That's interesting. That in a way, I'm talking about it, but the subject is now closed. The final word on it has been spoken.
And this is something, in India, we don't talk about it anymore, so to speak. Of course, the critics and the Congress and people do, and there is a lingering doubt about what happened. But there isn't a desire anymore to reopen that chapter for whatever reason, for various reasons. But in the Western world, it still lingers on as a question mark and an issue that gets raised with the left liberals there. So I think Mr. Modi this time in this, he does two things in his interview, which you will come to, I'm sure. He has punched India far above its weight in the world. And he is he's wanting to come across as the senior citizens in India. The local politics, domestic politics will now be left increasingly to Mr. Amit Shah. But he, as a messenger of peace, he's not said one critical word about China. He's essentially reached out to Donald Trump and the right-wing opinion in the United States of America. It's a very different profile he's trying to carve out for himself in his third term.
Yeah,
That of a
it's
senior statesman.
yeah. I think that's a very interesting point, that he wants to come across as somebody who's transcending all of the sort of small time electoral politics, and we'll come to that later as we play out some of the other clips. But let's stick to Gujarat. Dr. Manisha, Priyam, do you agree with Neerja's assessment that earlier there was a kind of prickliness when it came to asking the Prime Minister the Gujarat question? He obviously has always held that he was not treated fairly by the media. In many ways, it came to define his relationship with the quote unquote liberal media, the English speaking media, for many, many years. And now Neerja says that the way he's presenting it, he's offering a kind of last word. He's saying my opponents were in government, the judiciary examined it, the judiciary had the last word. And now I want to triumphantly remind all of you that since then there have been no riots in Gujarat. How did you read those comments?
No, the point is, look, you cannot deny that there were riots. He's saying since then there have been no riots.
Mhm.
So any analysis, whoever is doing it, saying this is the last word, actually first has to pay homage to those who died. And they did not die of natural causes like heart attack or suffering of cancer on a mass scale. There were riots, right?
Hmm.
Now, the point is, there cannot be a political final word. People were dead, right? Why it happened, who caused it, etc. I mean, the judiciary didn't find the reasons or couldn't find who did it, etc. What is the finding? I mean, who is responsible? Who has the final word on death? Obviously, all Indians could not have been standing on the site. And I think it's inappropriate to say this is the last word or the final word. I take the Prime Minister for his word that since then there have been no riots. But what memory do I have of how many riots happened before that? I mean, somebody who's studying riots may know that.
Hmm.
And to call a media left and liberal or whatever else, media is media.
No, he didn't
Until
use that.
now,
He didn't use those phrases. I use them because that's the truth of the time we live in.
so I let me tell you that media is media. Otherwise, we would not have been together. I mean, I'm not left or right, but I'm certainly liberal. And today, is it going to be a problem if I say that I believe in the values of liberalism? What else is democracy? Why else are we conversing?
Hmm.
And whose final word is it on? And what kind of words am I to believe in? So there have been riots in Gujarat. There's no doubt about this. Whether there have been less after that, yes, certainly. Whether there were more before that, I don't know. And whether this less or more comparison makes it any more significant to anoint someone or anybody with a final word, I mean, these are words of an interpreter, and I do not believe in it. I
And
believe
that,
every act of rioting needs to be
yeah,
decried, and this was not a foreign hand that created the riots, really.
yeah.
Why should I live in India in 2002 or even now, where there are riots, where there are large scale deaths that have not been caused by natural causes such as a heart attack or cancer? Or, we've, as a country, we've eliminated polio, right? That's our success as a third world country. And hate leading to death. Can you read a medical certificate which says cause of death? This. And I
Yeah.
think that's wrong. What the Prime Minister said is something very different. I would concede the political point that this is the first time this question has been posed to him in a long time. Till 2014, when I used to be on shows just ahead of the Gujarat State Assembly elections in 2012, this question was posed. The Prime Minister used to be quiet. I remember there used to be panels where Honorable Neerja ji was also by my side. Aarti Gerard ji used to be asking these questions. I remember all those debates. These questions were posed to the not then, the then Chief Minister of Gujarat. They were posed, and he had a certain stance, he had a certain silence. Since he's been the Prime Minister, he's maintained a silence. Today he's spoken. Yes, these facts are all correct. But were there
Okay.
riots in Gujarat? Yes, there were riots. Are these final words? No, they are not final words, because people died in a mass sort of
Yeah.
way without causes that were
I,
natural.
I just want to clarify that the context of that, I imagine the formulation given by Neerja was a political one, not a philosophical one. Neerja wanted to, I think, speak for herself, and then I'll come to Sugata and
Of
Sandeep.
course,
Neerja, yeah.
of course, the 2002 riots that took place is one of those events, developments that India will take a long time to live down. There is little doubt about that. What I was trying to decode, what is it that the Prime Minister was trying to get at?
Hmm.
As he spoke about the Gujarat riots. Very simply, he was trying to bring a closure to it.
Yeah,
Whether
the
I,
point was
whether
political.
Manisha, whether I agree with it or you disagree with it, that's a different
No,
debate.
no,
Okay.
I'm agreeing with everything anybody says. I'm just agreeing. I'm just
No, you don't have
thinking.
to.
I'm just
Everything
thinking that
everybody
people
says.
died. I'm
Okay.
agreeing with
Yeah, no, no,
everything
no,
you have
no, no.
said.
I
I'm
again,
just thinking.
not to make any riot that takes place in India
I'm just thinking.
is a rupture of our social fabric, and to that extent, we have to, whether it's
I have
84,
no
2002 Delhi
people
riots.
died. People died.
Yes, of course. I don't think that was. I don't think that was. I think the point that Neerja was trying to convey. But let's get other perspectives. Sugata, again, this is not to say we are concluding all discussions. Henceforth, no one will ever talk about Gujarat or Sikh riots, or people are going to talk about issues that are dear to them. There's going to be continued debate in different contexts. I think the question was political. I think we agree that the Prime Minister, for a period of time, was either not asked this question or did not choose to engage with this question. Let's put both facts on the table. And it is interesting that somebody comes in from the outside, a very well-known podcast host, and he asks with ease, he's answered with ease. You can agree, disagree with the answer. What did you think?
Uh, First of all, Barkha, we have to sort of remember that this was not a journalistic engagement at all. I mean, I've heard about 2 hours and 3 minutes. I mean, I could not complete the whole thing for different reasons. One of them being sort of, I mean, I lost interest midway. So 2 hours and 3 minutes is something that I heard. And to be fair to the Prime Minister, when he speaks of the Godra thing, he does not speak of closure.
Yeah.
And the
Correct.
host, podcast host, is also not the grilling type. He's not trained as a journalist. See, he calls himself an MIT researcher who's based in Texas, born in Tajikistan, migrated to US, friends of Ivanka Trump. I mean, the ecosystem from which he comes, and he starts the entire thing by speaking about how he kept a fast before he
Yeah.
interviewed Modi. So you need to remember that, see, this is, whether it's a friendly banter or a very serious dialogue, whatever it is, I mean, I found something very, very interesting in what Prime Minister Modi was trying to do. I'll borrow what Neerja ji said. Neerja ji said he was trying to behave like an elder statesman. And I completely agree with that, because he was not addressing an Indian audience. Even when he spoke of Godra, Barkha, he was bringing in cross references for the very first time of a larger context of terror that was taking place in the world.
Yeah.
And he spoke about the Twin Towers collapsing, the Kandahar thing happening. So he said it was not something that I did. He did not say it in so many words, but he said there was a natural environment for such a provocation. And then I was 3 days old as an MLA, and this happens. So he is trying to actually put a lot of facts from his side on the table for you to be a little more fair to him, whether you want to be fair to him or you don't want to be fair to
So
him.
he was locating, he spoke a
Absolutely.
lot, actually, Sugata, he spoke a lot about the events before 2002.
Exactly. That's where we need to sort of look at, because he was creating a marvelous, defense for the entire thing.
Yeah.
By saying that these things were happening, and this is not an isolated thing. So he also gave you the number of riots that had happened before. So to be fair to him, he was answering through facts. And whether see, there is in India, Barkha, your famous formulation, there is a chamcha reaction and there is a morcha reaction. So
Yeah.
I think we need to keep the two away and just look at it. And this was not a journalistic engagement. So that is the biggest statement to be made about it at all, in the first place.
Yeah, but as a journalist, I hate to admit it, but sometimes it's the non-journalistic engagements that lead to things that public figures, are not ready to talk about otherwise. So,
Right.
Sandip, as a fan of the Prime Minister, what did you take away from this conversation? And particularly from this theme of 2002, which has long been a kind of shadow that has hung over even his own mind. I mean, he feels clearly angry about how he was deconstructed at that time or seen at that time.
So, I'll take off from where Sugata said. As a communicator, as a master communicator at that, it is the choice of the medium and the message. I think that's so the point that he chose the podcast like this,
Yeah.
which is not only non-confrontational, non-hostile, and where you can expand at length and get your point. I think that was the key. I think he couldn't have found a better platform than to hold forth and expand on all these issues and many other things which he has done. As Neerja said in the beginning, this was a masterly attempt to reposition himself. And not only reposition himself, in our marketing terminology, we call it the blue ocean strategy. This was like a blue ocean strategy, redefining the brand Modi as far as the world is concerned. So far, had it been any journalistic engagement, as Sugata was saying, that would have been very focused and limited to the points on which Modi has been known and judged so far. He was able to totally change the context and put
Hmm.
all these things as a kind of a subset in the.
Why do you feel, I can see Manisha smiling, so I have a feeling she disagrees, but why do you feel that or what context do you feel he was able to change specifically?
He has, you see, the as I'm telling you, what there is a we are all too immersed in brand Modi or Modi as we know, and there is a limited set of people who know of him or people who have just heard of Modi. They associate him with a few attributes or a few events, etc., etc. Now, the fact that he has chosen a podcast and that to a podcaster like him, not your that Alex Ross or anybody who is overtly political, he
Yeah.
is now reaching out to a vast universe which is outside that conventional set. Modi wants to be recognized as a personality in India, not just run of the mill as another prime minister or another president of any other country, head of state or head of government. So he is lifting his position up, and that's why I think it has been extremely. I don't know whosoever decided to choose a podcast host like this guy.
Yeah.
Supposed to they could have they could have got some great interviewers. Indira Gandhi got interviewers of that day and age who were there, and
Yeah.
there were similar people. He could have, as I said, gone to an Alex Ross or some, I don't know what that guy's name is, people like them. He has chosen this because that's what a blue ocean strategy, redefining the context for
So,
everybody.
so I think the interesting question is, who was he addressing? And Dr. Priyam, I'll start with you there because this is an interesting. Neerja says he was trying to lift his political brand. Now, this is right now not about whether someone votes Modi or votes the other side. Simply as students of politics, he was trying to position himself, depending on your point of view, with success or failure, as above the noise of politics, routine politics in his third term. Sugata says he wasn't even addressing the Indians. He was addressing the global audience that doesn't completely understand him, that may have judged him through a set of headlines. And Sandip kind of agrees there that this was a kind of expansive conversation where he deliberately chose this non-journalistic forum to tell more about himself to the world. Did you feel that the essential audience was a global audience and not us here at home, Dr. Priya?
Uh, Surprisingly, if I'm given the permission, I have a slightly croaky voice. Sorry. If I'm giving the permission, I slightly disagree with my very esteemed co panelists. And I believe he's speaking to a globalized Indian middle class that wants
Hmm.
to hear Prime Minister Modi talking about global affairs,
Hmm.
punching his weight once again. Remember, the Modi that went to the elections in 2024 had just recently concluded the G20. The hubris then, even within the RSS, was, as many of the world leaders walked to Rajghat, that Modi ji got the world leaders and everybody bowed their head down. Everybody had that photo op with him. There was, whether people believe it or not, a certain feeling of, a deja vu or maybe an overconfidence that the globe comes to India, right? Now, that image, not of our own making, but of the kind of changes that have happened in the American presidency and the American leadership. Many events we've seen have not happened through the ways in which international diplomacy was known to have been conducted since 1945, especially India's engagements with the US, even though in the Cold War we said we were non-aligned, but we were clearly aligned with what was the supposedly left of center bloc, the USSR, traditionally great relationships with those set of countries. Now, here, that America, which held India with respect, except for the fact that America would keep playing the Pakistan Act on us, kept
Hmm.
Pakistan as a favored country, etc. Now, suddenly, when after years following liberalization, Pakistan had, America-Pakistan relationships had kind of, flattened out, and you saw Pakistan for what it is, And here suddenly Trump comes in, and you see a few punches that nobody in India is able to explain in terms of visuals. Now, here's a Modi who's talking to that globalized Indian middle class, for them to understand and believe that, look, here's a thinker behind the screen.
Yeah.
Trump may not be understanding him. The Indian media has done him in. We don't understand him. But there is a deep, and he's also talking about himself as a long duty political leader, which I must concede he is. He is indeed a 3-term chief minister of Gujarat. He is indeed a 2-term full prime minister and a 3rd term with a large majority, although not a clear majority. And I do think these are important political feats.
Yeah.
So it's to shore up that globalized Indian middle class saying, all is not lost. Here I am, the thinker behind the gaze, and behind this, my reflective words are these. And look, it's reviving some of the old themes that I didn't do it. Sure, he may not have done it if the judiciary has not been able to find out,
Yeah.
if all the police inquiries have not been able to find out. Why bring this up? The Indian media or we, the Indians, were not bringing it up. So it's a reflective gaze of a political leader who wants to punch back his position onto that place in the Committee of Nations, which he truly has made his Indian electorate believe that we are at the
I,
center of
I,
all this. That's where he wants to be.
I think that last point I'd like to take to Neerja and also to Sugata and Sandeep before we play out his account of his relationship with Donald Trump. Neerja, who was the audience according to you? I think Dr. Priyam has an interesting formulation. It was the world, yes, but it was also the globalized Indian. The Indian who today lives in Canberra or California, but feels that her country is seen differently. And in part, that is because Modi has repositioned India, not just himself. He's done that with success, I think.
I think, as far as the diaspora is concerned, and many people will tell you wherever you go, that to date, 8 out of 10 Indians abroad are pro-Modi. I mean, that's across the board, the kind of feedback you get. My own feeling is that his main objective was Trump, because Trump's the tariff war that we all expect, or how it's going to affect countries, remains to be seen. How it's going to affect India also. 2025 may turn out to be like 1991, as seminal a moment for India. And I think he knows he's got to navigate it. And they've shown huge restraint in the way they've handled Donald Trump. For him to be totally positive about Donald Trump in that interview, his ability to take risks, his, sitting in the stadium listening to him when the Howdy Modi was taking place. Then Modi says to him, we'll walk around the stadium. He gives security a go by and trusts Modi because his main concern is America, just as my concern is India. We have many things in common. He did not say that, he did not mention at all that Donald Trump did not come out to the portico of White House to welcome Mr. Modi in February when he went there. He came out when Zelensky went there. He came out when other leaders went there. It was a blonde woman who did that. Or, even the most provocative thing that at least public opinion would have expected him to raise with Trump, I don't know whether they did in private, with the way Indian illegal migrants were brought back handcuffed. So those are things that agitated public opinion in India, but they have been highly restrained because they know they have to navigate a very difficult terrain, which means, our economy, everything is going to get affected in the weeks
So
and
you
months to
actually
come.
think that this was not about rebranding at home, it was about addressing America under Trump.
America and right-wing opinion in the United States of America.
Very interesting. So I want to play out a little bit of what the Prime Minister said when asked about Donald Trump. And in fact, Trump reposted, reshared what was said, which is also important. So before Sugata and Sandeep come in, let's listen to what Modi said on Trump.
हमारा ह्यूस्टन में कार्यक्रम था हाउडी मोदी, और मैं और राष्ट्रपति ट्रम्प दोनों, और पूरा स्टेडियम खचाखच भरा हुआ था। इतने लोगों का होना अमेरिका के जीवन के अंदर बहुत बड़ी घटना है। खेलकूद के मैदान में तो पॉलिटिकल रैली में इतने बड़े लोग होना बहुत बड़ी बात है। तो इंडियन डायस्पोरा के लोग इकट्ठे आए थे। तो हम लोग दोनों स्पीच किए, वो नीचे बैठ करके मुझे सुन रहे थे। अब ये उनका बड़प्पन है जी। अमेरिका के राष्ट्रपति स्टेडियम में नीचे बैठ करके सुन रहे हो और मैं मंच पर से भाषण कर रहा हूँ, ये उनका बड़प्पन है। मैं भाषण करके नीचे गया और हम तो जानते हैं कि अमेरिका की सिक्योरिटी की कितनी बड़ी वो रहता है, कितने प्रकार की स्क्रूटिनी होती है। मैं जाकर के वो रहे इसके लिए धन्यवाद करने गया, फिर मैंने उनको ऐसे ही कहा, अगर मैंने कहा आपको इतराज ना हो तो आइए हम जरा एक अ, पूरे स्टेडियम का चक्कर काट के आते हैं, इतने लोग हैं तो हाथ ऊपर करके नमस्ते करके आ जाते हैं। अब ये अमेरिका की लाइफ में ये इम्पॉसिबल है कि हजारों की भीड़ में अमेरिकन
Yeah.
राष्ट्रपति चल पड़े, एक पल का भी विलंब किए बिना वो मेरे साथ चल पड़े भीड़ में। अमेरिका की जो सुरक्षा तंत्र था पूरा वो एकदम से वो हो गया था, डिस्टर्ब हो गया था। मेरे लिए टच कर गया कि इस व्यक्ति में हिम्मत है, ये डिसीजन खुद लेते हैं। और दूसरा, मोदी पर उनको भरोसा है कि मोदी ले जा रहा है तो चलिए चलते हैं। तो ये आपसी विश्वास का भाव, ये इतना हमारा मजबूती मैंने उसी दिन देखा। और मैंने राष्ट्रपति ट्रम्प को उस दिन जिस रूप में महसूस किया कि सिक्योरिटी वालों को पूछे बिना मेरे साथ चल देना हजारों लोगों के बीच में, अब उसका वीडियो देखोगे तो आपको आश्चर्य होगा। और जब उन पर गोली चली अब इस चुनाव कैंपेन में, तो मुझे राष्ट्रपति ट्रम्प एक ही नजर आए। उस स्टेडियम में मेरा हाथ पकड़ करके चलने वाले ट्रम्प और गोली लगने के बाद भी अमेरिका के लिए जीना, अमेरिका के लिए ही जिंदगी, ये जो उनका रिफ्लेक्शन था, क्योंकि मैं नेशन फर्स्ट वाला हूँ, वे अमेरिका फर्स्ट वाले हैं, मैं भारत फर्स्ट वाला हूँ, तो हमारी जोड़ी बराबर जम जाती है। तो ये चीजें हैं कि
So he's actually likening himself to Trump. It's very interesting. He's saying, वो अमेरिका फर्स्ट है, मैं भारत फर्स्ट हूं, मैं नेशन फर्स्ट हूं, वो अमेरिका फर्स्ट है. And the same Trump, Sugata, who took my hand and did that walk around the stadium in the Howdy Modi event, though it was not structured, was the same brave, risk-taking Trump who was able to get up after a bid to kill him. He's
Yeah.
drawing an analogy.
Yes.
He's actually saying कि हमारी जोड़ी जमती है.
Correct. So my reaction is, I am often on the side that agrees with Manisha ji. So today I'll disagree with Manisha,
Yeah.
and also partially with Neerja ji, because I don't agree that Modi has been addressing a globalized middle class audience, because they're already converts. He doesn't have to convert them again, because I've just finished a book on diaspora. So I know how the whole thing has transformed. So, I don't think he needs to reconvert them. So the diaspora issue is out of the question. Now, Neerja ji spoke about Trump. Now, even when he speaks about Trump, it is not trying to curry favor with Trump. There's already an existing relationship, and he's trying to gauge his new mood. There are certain kind of piquant situations that have arisen. He's trying to probably ease that out, but I feel that his nazar, or his gaze, is not just at America or at India, but I think he's trying to position himself, because there's an absolute vacuum. If you look at the British Prime Minister, he's trying to become a peace agent. So full of the British newspapers, tabloids and all that, they started, saying that now he has earned a purpose for himself. So Macron is trying to do something. There is Saudi Arabia trying to negotiate. Amidst all of this, we don't know that Trump may be actually pushing Modi, because if you look at Putin's reaction, and if you also look at what China has said today after the interview, it looks like Modi is looking beyond a lot of these people. And we go back to what Neerja ji said. He was probably speaking like an elderly statesman, because he needs to sort of put himself in the middle. And therefore, his criticism of UN was also very valid. So he
Yeah.
said UN does nothing. So he is trying to be that new person in the middle who probably can hold the hands of everybody else, not just Trump. He has Trump's friendship. There's a certain kind of reassurance there already. And then, I mean, the diaspora is anyway there. And the media is not his concern. People like Modi and Trump, I don't think they care anything. In fact, he gave an analogy at about 2 hours point in that interview where he said Makki and
Mm.
Madhumakki. He spoke about a bee and a
And a
fly.
honey, huh?
Yeah, honeybee. So he gave the difference between journalism and the kind of journalism that happens. So I don't think he's really bothered with any of us. I mean, I'm honestly speaking. He is looking at something else, and he knows there is a new ecosystem in the world now which makes possible his ambition of playing a global role. So this
Yeah.
is he's positioning himself for a certain global role. It could be European Commission, I mean, European Union. It could be America. It could be the kind of Zelensky kind of situation, the isolated Trump. I mean, Putin. I think he's the only one talking to everybody. If you last month, you saw all the European commissioners coming to India. So he is
Yeah.
in a very different vantage position at this point of time, and I think he's trying to leverage that.
Sandeep, did you see it that way? All of us have our own interpretations. I think it's fair to say Modi doesn't care about media or doesn't need to care about media, would be the more accurate way to put it. And that's, by the way, not unique to India. I mean, look at what's happening between Trump and CNN and MSNBC and social media influencers now in the front row at the White House press conference. These organizations going through tumult of their own, sacking editors, replacing editors, sacking columnists, trying to find a new market, a new relevance for themselves. So the media debate is a whole different show. But this idea that
See,
Trump
when
was
you
trying to seek a global role, what do you say,
see,
Sandeep?
first of all, Barkha, when you're communicating, you don't do it in isolation with only one single target audience in mind. You take others into account also. So Modi would have definitely taken Trump into account, or for that matter, China, Pakistan, Putin, everybody into account, in as a part of the larger, set who will listen to this interview at least in parts and try to
Yeah.
take out certain things from it. So they're definitely there. As far as the Indian diaspora is concerned, I think both Neerja and Sugata said the same thing, that they are already converted, and so there is nothing to preach to the converted. If anything at all, he has given them more ammunition or more talking points to buttress their support for Modi, to say that it's no longer, he's not just a political leader, is much larger than that. He's a thinker, or he's a spiritual and minded person, etc., etc. But
Hmm.
I think, as Neerja and all of you said, in some extent, Modi is acutely conscious of his own image. And now he would like to leave a mark on history. All of you
Hmm.
keep saying, oh, he could be a third term prime minister, but he'll never be Nehru. But he would like to, at least in his attempt, whether he succeeds or not, he would
Yeah.
like to leave behind his own distinct stamp. So he is repositioning himself and raising himself to another level. Now, and for him now, India, what has to be done has been done. Diaspora, what has to be done is done. Now, if he wants to leave a mark in the global stamp, to be remembered as Narendra Modi, not that somebody who was a prime minister 2 terms, 3 terms and gone away. He would like to do that, and some of these things, Barkha, half a minute more. These points, whether it's a Gayatri mantra or whether the yoga or anything else,
Hmm.
these are some of the things which are also going to stick. With people, even if it sticks with 1% of the audience, that makes a difference, and he's
Yeah.
conscious of it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thought, that at the end of 3 terms, what is next for Modi? And in his mind, he doesn't he wants to be remembered by the world, not only as a successful politician at home. Before we get last comments, a brief clip, a large parts of the conversation wandered into spirituality. What is Ram? What is, do you fear death? And Modi came up with a formulation which he called 1+1. What did he mean? Let's take a look.
मैं अकेलापन कभी महसूस नहीं करता, इसलिए कि मैं हमेशा मानता हूँ 1+1 की थियरी को। और जब 1+1 की मेरी थियरी है, वो मेरा सात्विक समर्थन करती है। और ये 1+1, कोई भी पूछेगा 1+1 कौन है, तो मैं कहता हूँ पहला 1 जो है वो मोदी है, और +1 है वो ईश्वर है। मैं अकेला कभी नहीं होता हूँ, वो हमेशा मेरे साथ होता है।
So this was in response to being asked whether you feel lonely. Now we have to also understand that the Western idea of a political figure is a very different idea from the Indian one. Our political leaders have often been single, without family attachments, bachelors and single women in public life, whereas the Western idea of a political figure is one with the family down to the sort of pet cat and the pet dog, the very much the complete family portrait. So it's a very interesting thing that he's asked, do you not feel lonely? And this is what he says. In any case, last comments now. I'll start with you, Sugata. One big takeaway, you said you lost interest at some point, it was too long for you. Maybe you already knew much more, so you were not the, already as someone who covers politics, writes about it, maybe you were not the TG, not the target audience. But the one big takeaway for you in the parts that you did hear.
Yeah, I mean, in the 2 hours that I heard, Barkha, which is substantial, I was left with only about 58 minutes. See, the one thing is, he sort of comes across, unlike any other prime minister that India has seen, he comes across as someone who is completely bereft of any Western influence. And there is no textual influence, there is only anecdotal influence. I mean, you don't see him as someone who, there's not a, I mean, in the 2 hours that I watched, there's not a single statement where he says, I mean, I read Bertrand Russell. I mean, you can't catch him like that. I mean, his rationality is very different. It's all deduced from lived experience, and there is no textual influence, and there is no Western influence. And he speaks about the civilizational idea of India, and not again a constitutional idea of India, which is again a book. So that's the reason why I say there is no textual influence at all in this prime minister, which is amazing to. I mean, I was, in fact, at some point, I forget at what point, I was suddenly reminded of Nehru's autobiography, and I was wondering at what age did Nehru write his autobiography. He was, I mean, under 50, I think, or just around 50. So prime ministers in India, I mean, at least of the class of Nehru, articulated their personal whatever thing through words. And Modi is, using it in words as being not the written word, but through the spoken word. He's actually autobiographical in this whole thing. But none of those ideas are fresh, because it's somewhere you feel they're hand downs of his larger ideological disposition.
Yeah, like
Because there are
for
moments
us,
of peace. Yeah,
there are moments of
loneliness.
there are moments of
I would have expected that to be a little different. I mean, something more. There's nothing off the cuff. He's a prepared person. He always comes prepared to answer those kind of questions. So there's no surprise at all in the whole thing.
Yeah, but I think that would be fair for all of us who are so immersed in politics. We've probably heard some of these formulations before in one form or the other. But Sandip, this point about being a prime minister on whom there was zero Western influence, right? On almost every bit, or no textual influence. There are others who have grown up in poverty, like Dr. Manmohan Singh, but certainly came very influenced by the texts they had read, by the books they had read, and so on. This is a much more, this is the life I had. This was my life with the RSS. This is how the RSS changed me. This is what I became. It's a sort of practical handbook for life kind of conversation, as opposed to these were the thinkers who influenced me. What was your takeaway?
I think that's very real. That's a real Modi, which many people refuse to accept, or people who try to challenge his Hinduism or his knowledge. He has lived his life. He has been karma yogi to that extent, because whatever he is because from his pracharak days, he may have done his reading, he may have gone elsewhere, but essentially it is the life which he has lived. And the point I was going to add to what Sugata said, you see, also his exposition of RSS ideology, or what RSS is, on which he spent a lot of time in this podcast, is
Yeah.
again, it all gels in, it kind of weaves together, and there's no inconsistency. The way he explained RSS to this audience, I think there is also a clear thread between himself and what RSS, and the entire picture, or the canvas he was trying to paint.
Dr. Priyam, last, sorry, Sugata, you had a sentence? Yeah, Sugata?
Just to add to what he said,
Sandeep. Huh.
Sandip ji said, sorry, see, when he was talking of RSS, he was trying to explain it like the Peace Corps that Kennedy set up, the voluntary movement. So
Yeah.
it's he's speaking a different language to explain RSS to the Western audience. I just
Right. So
wanted to
we're,
add that as
yeah,
well.
no. So we're back to the Western audience, but Dr. Priyam's, not only the globalized middle class Indian. For you, were there any surprises in the bits that you heard? I
Not
can't hear
the
Dr. Yeah,
text.
now I can. Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
If this is not the text prime minister, this is also not the folk prime minister. And he's not talking about the people, he's talking about something which is somewhere out there and stretches the time horizon beyond lived experience. Remember, nothing in his speech was about the lived experience. If it wasn't about the text, it certainly wasn't about the lived experience of the ordinary. It was somewhere along the way trying to pitch it into a uniquely cultural idiom that is believed by many to be anchored in deep civilizational roots of India. For most things that the prime minister said, there was an attempt to stretch the time frame. When you don't want to respond to something immediate, you want to portray yourself as an elder statesman or a great philosopher or a thinker who can pontificate on what is happening the here and now. That's the prime minister, and that's the image that he wants for himself. Remember, formulating that if Trump is doing it for his country, I'm doing it. It's a position of equals. Now that's a tough one. Remember, the globalized Indian middle class is neither able to make sense of what Trump is doing now, nor is able to make sense that if there was that great handshake at Howdy Modi, what is
Yeah.
it about the handcuffs? Now, here, without making a reference to that, remember, the one thing that the prime minister does is trying to explain to this confused audience that, look, without a fat book, this is what real politic international style now looks like. So on the one pitch, there's the international, and on the other side, you come. We are not talking about the problems of the here and now. We are not talking of the category of the woke. We about India. We are talking about civilizational, and I think it will also shore up the RSS, which had been seen as an insular cultural organization. Now they will be seen as an organization that has Modi as its leader. Modi, not just the prime minister, Modi, not just the chief minister who ruled, remember, by putting the RSS somewhat at bay, but now Modi, the rebranded leader of the RSS, trying to give as a gift to the RSS a method or a model by which they can break away from their insular image and engage with international dynamism. And remember, once again, however much I'm falsified by my colleagues, that globalized Indian middle class needs something to argue back where there are other liberal audiences. Remember, you go to Australia, you go to England, you go to America, you may be in defeat, but there is a liberal public opinion that counters or argues back with the globalized Indian middle class, and they have
Right.
new tools now. They have new social cultural imaginaries given to them by the prime minister himself. The body of the prime minister is the politic of India. He is India's cultural and, I would say, political ambassador. He's also India's international relations brand in a world in which nobody understands where the post World War multilateral organization led or peace and open covenants of peace, openly derived that type of things, they've all been set aside. But the one person who understands this emerging new world order is our Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji.
Yeah, interesting thought there, Neerja, that, whether you think the audience was Trump, whether you think the audience was a globalized middle class, it is Modi who is, in a way, presenting an India story in a world in churn, in a world where there is a highly polarized, divisive discourse in most of these countries, where, yes, as you mentioned, he's also addressing right-wing opinion. But I think what Manisha Priyam is arguing is that at the same time, he's also offering up India as this sort of um, country on the global stage that is having its moment, and therefore cannot be dismissed only as one led by a right wing populist. I think Modi is rejecting that label that is used often for him. That's my sense, Neerja.
Barkha, it's true. I agree with Manisha there. As I said at the beginning, he's trying to punch India way above its weight in the world, as I said. But it's a soft image of Modi that comes across. It is a spiritual Modi that he's projecting. It is, of course, the elder statesman that he's projecting, spiritual as opposed to only religious and Hindu in the way he's formulated it. He's talked about his fasting. I mean, one didn't know 4 to 5 months he had one meal a day.
Yeah.
One didn't know that for 18 days of Navratras twice, he has only hot water. I didn't know this. It was interesting too. And that it gives him inner urja and energy, and he can marshal his inner reserves in order to be able to make those difficult decisions. So that part of it, as a peacemaker globally, he said, I'm for peace, and that does not mean I'm neutral. So he is again positioning himself, reaching out to China, reaching out, of course, to Trump, even Pakistan, if only they'd give up their sponsoring of terrorism. So he wants peace in this region. And China and US have not reacted negatively at all. So, all that, yes, and the RSS. This shows that the RSS is reaching out in a new way to the RSS, which has been unhappy with the cultification that has taken place, because they want decisions to be taken collectively. So somewhere I think the RSS is on board again. And his words showed that. So overall, yes, focusing on the legacy that he would like to leave. And I think increasingly we will see this kind of positioning by him on the global stage and reaching, striking the wider notes. And increasingly, we may see Amit Shah play the role, internally, much more so in the third term than we thought initially. But very interesting interview overall. It gives us new insights about Narendra Modi.
Well, I think that's for sure, that there's a lot to think about, a lot to talk about. Even if, as Sugata said, we may have heard bits and snatches of it, in the course of speeches, in the course of, other podcasts, other interviews. But yet, I think that this is an interesting point, that it is repositioning of a kind, or an elevated positioning, maybe a better way to put it, not a repositioning. He's not really dropping anything, except that this is not an alpha male Modi. It is a softer Modi, a spiritual Modi that was being certainly presented before Lex Fridman. But Modi is also able to adapt himself to the political context, to the geopolitical context. I don't necessarily think there's one Modi. He's agile enough to adapt to changing politics and changing context. But we leave it there. Thank you, Dr. Priyam, Neerja Chowdhury, Sugata, Srinivasaraju, and Sandip Ghose. It's a pleasure. And to our audience, thank you. See you tomorrow. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Vote Her Story and support independent, robust journalism.